have quorum now.
Oh.
So as long as we have a majority, which is 4, then we're okay. So whenever you're ready.
Oh,
No pressure.
let's get this thing going.
Good evening, committee members. We are ready to begin the March 23rd, 2021 Downtown Advisory Committee meeting. Looks like we do the Pledge of Allegiance first. Committee Hernandez, if you could please lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
The United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Stephanie, if you could take roll, please.
Yes, thank you. Chair Guerrero.
Here.
Committee Member Hernandez.
Here.
Committee Member Avendano. And Committee Member Amick.
Here.
Committee Members Lopez and Boyd are absent. Committee Member Segura is excused. We have quorum.
Great, thank you. Moving on to public comment portions of the meeting, each member of the public wishing to address the advisory committee on any item on the agenda, including any hearing, will have 3 minutes. There are no limitations on the items that one can discuss as long as it's within the 3 minutes. Do we have any cards or speakers?
No speaker slips.
See none. We'll move on. We'll move on to presentations tonight.
Yes, good evening, committee members and members of the public. Tonight we have a few items on the agenda, which Karen Gully from PlaceWorks will announce, but just kind of want to welcome everyone back. And did want to announce before we get going that the City Council did approve our vision statement at their last council meeting. So that's good news, and we're charging forward. They also approved the land use districts as well. If you remember the maps that showed the zoning, kind of the zoning areas, they approved that also. So with that, Karen, would you please introduce your team?
Yeah, so Karen Gully with PlaceWorks and Chad So with PlaceWorks. Good evening, everyone. I'm glad to be back and bringing you some new material to go over tonight. I'm going to start by covering some updates and some of the outreach activities that have been going on and that are currently going on. And then we're going to move into kind of the crux of the conversation related to the specific plan itself. And then we are going to have a presentation by the RDICO team and an opportunity for you all to ask questions. So as Oliver just mentioned, the draft vision, land use districts, and build-out table were reviewed and approved during the March 16th meeting by the City Council. Keep in mind that, and they know as well, some of those numbers may continue to get refined as we go through the environmental process. And of course, we've always told you that we will come back and revisit that vision towards the end of the process to make sure it still has everything we want in it. The good news is because of that blessing, if you will, we are now able to initiate the environmental process for the specific plan, which puts us on a track to be hopefully to hearings by the end of this year for both the specific plan and the EIR. So I'm going to cover the public participation activities first. This past Saturday, we had what was called a Go Human mobility event. It was tagged onto the art festival, the city-sponsored art festival along Court Street. We had booths. RDICO had a booth. We had our mobility team. They had a booth. We did as well, related to the general plan and specific plan. We were stationed right by these demonstration projects that showed really how streets could be transformed. So we had this colorful, artful crosswalk. We had bulb outs that are common to help calm traffic. We had a parklet that you can see there in the photo that can be done in 1 or 2 parking spaces to be able to expand the activities that happen along a sidewalk system. And so with that event, we talked to over 100 people, got a number of 100 surveys done, and those results are being tallied now. We will post this event on our website, and I think it already went on to the city's Instagram page. We literally had people coming saying, I had to come down and see this because they saw it on your Instagram page, which I thought was pretty cool. Okay, I'll just wait. It's okay. I'll wait a second. We just got started. We were starting a little late tonight, so this is just the first part of the presentation. In terms of other public participation activities, I can just update you the Community Guide to Planning Initiative. The Session 2 on land use was conducted on March 1st, both in person and virtual. It included 24 participants, and so that's going well. And there will be others coming along shortly. In progress, we have our upcoming Downtown Specific Plan workshops, April 5th at the Public Library and April 7th at the 5th Street Senior Center. And then we also have a virtual one that will be April 11th. So for those that don't have an opportunity to come in person, we will be doing the same kind of exercises and having the same kind of conversations online. Those events have been posted for over a month now, starting beginning of February, and we're continuing to get the word out through social media, through the different events that we are attending, and we've also got the council promoting these events as well. So we're hoping for a good turnout. Just to give you guys a little bit more idea of what's going to be going on. We're going to set it up as an open house, and so we'll have a series of large boards for each of the land use districts up on easels, so people can come in, we can talk to them about each of the land use districts, what's envisioned, the kinds of changes, the kinds of uses, that can be expected over time, and get their feedback. We'll also have a booth with our folks that are relooking at our streets, so we'll be able to continue to take input on that. Since our first series of workshops, we've refined those cross sections, and we're ready to get more input on that. And we may have some other booths as well, but that kind of gives you an idea of what we'll be doing.
I'm sorry, do you have the address for the 5th Street Senior Center?
G, 5th and G.
I thought everyone knew right where it is.
The address is 600 West 5th Street.
600 West 5th Street?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any questions on that? I hope to see you all there. Bring your neighbors, please. Bring your friends. Post it on your media. So in addition, as you may know, there have been a series of land use planning workshops related to the general plan. We've got 4 of them completed, although add 5 to that because the 5th one was last night. And so this is a hands-on small group working session to provide input on land uses within each of the districts and then also citywide. So if you haven't had a chance to attend one of those, we would encourage you to do that. And then we also have taken the in-person activities and created a social pinpoint exercise online so that anyone at any time can basically use the QR code, go onto the website, and and go to a location within the city and start answering the kinds of questions that are being asked to provide feedback. So, and that'll be up for quite a while. So we'll be continuing to collect that input throughout probably the next couple of months at least. And then just in general, the promotion that's been going on, emails and e-blasts to the mailing list. We've got Facebook and Instagram posts. In the utility bill, there was an announcement made for the workshops that was an online announcement through the online bills that people get. We've been advertising through the city's monthly newsletter. There was also a public service announcement, a video that was prepared by the city. Stephanie and Harold narrated those 1-minute videos on these workshops to get the word out. And then we've been teaming with local organizations and churches to also help us get the word out, and that's going well. And we've updated our project website, and we're starting to see more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not attendance. Yes, thank you, traffic. And then we are also increasing our collaboration with local CBOs, and they've been great in terms of really helping to generate participation. So before I move on from public participation, does anyone have any questions? Okay. All right, so now we're starting to move into that phase of the process where we're getting into the meat of the specific plan. And I know that during the very first meeting of the advisory committee, I walked through what a specific plan was, how it related to the general plan, and there was just, I know, a lot of information presented. So I just want to do a real quick overview.
I'm sorry, guys.
That's okay. So I just wanted to do a summary, again, of what we see the structure of the specific plan being. So the outline for the specific plan will include an executive summary that highlights the vision statement and the process for creating the downtown specific plan. We'll provide context for the existing conditions and the projected future conditions. We'll talk a little bit about the history of the downtown, move into an introduction about the specific plan itself, the objectives for the specific plan, and then the different components of it and what role they have in kind of redirecting the future of the downtown. Then, of course, you know, we've got our downtown vision. We'll be elaborating on that with some design principles and key ideas that come out of that vision. And then, of course, we've got our downtown districts that we will be going over. And really, that then becomes the basis for the zoning for each of those district areas. Following that, we move into the infrastructure plans that are needed to accommodate the future development, and those studies are just now getting kicked off because we have a build-out plan and a land use plan. So those infrastructure studies include circulation, water, sewer, stormwater, and other dry utilities. So we will have plans to support the downtown for all of those. That will be part of the specific plan document. Then we'll have development and design standards. We are just starting on those. And I know that in the past couple of meetings, we started to share some of those when we talked about heights and number of stories and density. But there's a lot more detail. And to be frank, our next meeting in April will be all about that. And we'll send out information in advance so you can take a look at and get familiar with some of the ideas. As part of that design and development standards, we also include a list of permitted, conditional, and prohibited uses within a specific plan. And that is really the focus of tonight. And then finally, at the end of the document, is the administration and the implementation of how the plan is going to get administered by city staff, how development applications are going to get processed, and other kinds of implementation measures that need to happen. So let's talk about downtown uses. So I've given you all a handout that shows what would normally be in the city zoning code. For all the different zone designations, there's pages of lists of uses that go along with that. And each of those uses is considered as to whether or not it should be allowed within a particular zoning district. So, for example, within a residential zone, you wouldn't allow any of the industrial uses. I mean, that's something like that. That would be obvious. In general, I just want to cover the kinds of categories that are looked at by the city are all the residential categories. Then we have agriculture, open space categories, parks, trails, and then recreation as well. Then under commercial, you've got retail services, industrial, and then transportation and special purpose categories. And then the city basically regulates uses depending on what type they are. They're either permitted. There's also something called an administrative use permit. And then you go into conditional uses, which means they're discretionary. The city doesn't have to approve them. Home occupation permits is another category of permits. There's temporary uses like the events that happen in downtown. And then there are uses that are not allowed in certain categories. And so we are going to be doing that for the specific plan and these land use districts. That is one of the beauties of a specific plan, is that you get to tailor and actually narrow the list of uses so that you are really focusing the attention where it needs to be. I just wanted to share this with you just to kind of give you an idea of what we're going to be covering tonight. So under residential, you've got the single family category, you've got multifamily, and then you've got a range of types of care uses and supportive housing uses. Under open space and recreation, there are community centers, there's parks, trails, rec facilities, both public and private. You've got theaters, other kinds of similar recreation. Under commercial retail, it's the whole range of consumer goods, from markets to drugstores and other kinds of clothing stores, your big five, the consumer goods world. That would also be, a Walmart, a Target. Then under eating establishments, those are also commercial retail uses, and they're always distinguished between with and without alcohol. And the reason being is because some cities, not some cities, most cities, restrict certain businesses with alcohol to certain locations and to a tighter use permit process so that the conditions are looked at more carefully. Then you've got gas stations. They fit under that category. You've got automotive sales. You've got building supplies. Those all fall under commercial retail uses. Then under commercial services, you've got the automotive repair, car wash, daycares, equipment sales, financial services. You can kind of see there's the services that would belong in a neighborhood, and then there's the services that probably belong more in an industrial area. Then you've got true industrial and transportation and infrastructure uses. Those are the manufacturing, the processing, the repair services, the larger scale warehousing and wholesaling. Outdoor processing and storage falls under that, a dismantling facility, R&D uses, recycling facilities, public utilities, truck stops, yards. I'm just giving you a highlight of the kinds of uses that are considered when we're going to be looking at these land use districts. And then you've got this special land use category where institutional uses fall, schools, and you've got public schools, private schools, trade schools, colleges, other kinds, hospitals, adult businesses, Commercial cannabis is also considered a special use, drive-through facilities, and then temporary uses. So with that in mind, yes.
Before we move on, so this is just an introduction to the land uses, and so the table that was provided to you, that as Karen mentioned, that's citywide. Those are uses that we're looking at citywide. So what I'd ask for you to do is, when you take this chart home with you, mark, cross out, or whatever notations, those uses on that table that you have in front of you that you believe are not appropriate for the downtown area. So again, as an example, we are not going to put a dismantling facility in our downtown area, or a truck stop, kind of thing. So there are some of these uses that stand out that will not be preferred in the downtown. At a future exercise, what we will do is we'll have that table, and essentially we'll have columns, each column representing each of the land use districts. So we have 10 different districts, and so you can go across and you will be able to, in a snapshot, say, well, okay, this particular use, restaurants as an example, with or without alcohol, we can check whether it's permitted or whether it's CUP as you go across, and you can see what areas. And so it'll be able to, something so you can easily cross-reference where they will be allowed at a snapshot, rather than having to look back and forth in a specific plan. We'll have them in one location and one table to fill that out. So we'll be so that'll be a future exercise. And so if you don't mind, between now and the next couple of meetings, kind of going through that list and identify those that are not appropriate. Obviously, the industrial uses are not something that's going to be appropriate for the downtown. But then we have other commercial related uses. There's car washes and some of these others, and so vehicle repair and that sort of thing. So just be mindful of that. And so the list is not suggesting that that's what we're recommending for the downtown. It's just letting you know what else in the city is allowed and how we want to narrow it down for us. And along with that, Karen had mentioned in one of the later chapters of the specific plan, it talks about implementation, and that covers how projects are to be approved. And so there are administrative permits. Those are staff level items. Someone comes to the counter and they say, I want to do this business, or I want to do this development, and there are certain criteria that allow staff the ability to approve that. The next level is the conditional use permit, or the discretionary types. Those go to the Planning Commission. And so what we are trying to do in our specific plan is to streamline the development process or the entitlement process. And so the goal of our specific plan will be to clearly articulate the standards and the regulations. And so if it's evident that you're meeting, the parking, the landscaping, the height, you meet all the standards, you mark all the boxes, the architecture meets the design guidelines and everything, we're going to be recommending that be a staff level approval. And so there'll be, what we are envisioning is that very few items will go to the Planning Commission and or City Council. Maybe some of the special uses, or more a use that maybe needs to be more regulated for certain conditions, kind of things. And so what we're looking for is a specific plan that at the end of the day makes it easier for development to occur. And so you hear a lot of cities tout, we're business friendly, we have a streamlined process and so forth. Everyone says it, not everyone has that. Streamlined to me and to someone else might mean two different time periods. What we're trying to do is we're trying to create a process that makes it super user friendly, if that makes sense.
And we'll spend time on that later too. So you'll have it in front of you and we'll walk through it. So back to tonight, we are going to go through each district, and what we've done is identified what we're currently thinking and what we want to talk with you about. So this is meant to be a dialogue, not a presentation. And I'm really looking for feedback. Are we headed in the right direction? And you may have a question, well, what about this kind of use? And then I think we should talk about it. And Oliver can weigh in on how it's handled elsewhere in the city, and then we can talk about how perhaps the downtown area is different, and maybe it's handled differently here. So with that, I'm going to dive in. We're not in a hurry tonight. We've got plenty of time. We're going to go through all these districts. and we'll still have time for the RDICO presentation. So this is just a great chance for you to weigh in, and I want to encourage that. All right, so under the permitted uses, and like Oliver said, if it's permitted and and the project complies with everything in the specific plan, that's checked by staff, and they get to move forward with their drawings and starting to pull their own permits. So the kinds of permitted, remember, you have a question, don't you? Yes.
Question I have, do you have a map that what businesses now that are today permitted uses? Because in the south part of San Bernardino, there's so many trucking, illegal parking. There's parking on dirt, there's no landscaping, they're using crushed aggregate, which is in violation of the stormwater pollution prevention plans. It just seems like it's hard to see what is been permitted. Is there a map available? Oh. Is there a map available that we can see what has been permitted?
We really don't have a map like that, but we're focusing on the downtown, which gets us from 8th to Rialto. And so a lot of what the truck parking and terminals and those kinds of things, those are all happening in the on the southern end of town, or some in the northern end. But what we're trying to do is let's pretend for a moment that the 600 acres is vacant.
Okay. Okay.
And so another what we'll be doing as well with the specific plan, I feel like I'm on my foot here, or the development code is when adopted, there's going to be a section that talks about non-conforming uses, right? And so the question is going to come up. It's like, well, okay, let's say for example, I have a drive-through restaurant. I'm looking at the first sheet here, drive-through restaurant, and it's not permitted in this zone anymore. In other words, you cannot build a new one. You can't come in and propose a new one because it's not allowed. It's prohibited. But what if I already have one? We have. I think is Rogers up there? I think it's right, and so we do. There might be an existing drive-through,
Okay.
right? And so then there's different ways of approaching non-conforming uses. There's usually a amortization period. You could last another 20 years. After that, you go away. There's a life expectancy, if you will. There's also usually limitations on if you can expand or make modifications to it. And so some cities are more restrictive than others, where they say if it's non-conforming, you can't touch it at all. You could continue to be there, but you can't change. And so that's what we're looking at. So if we're envisioning a blank slate here, in the perfect world, the 600 acres is completely redeveloped with some exceptions, and we have a new downtown area, and so that's what we're looking for. But to answer your earlier question, we do have, as part of our general plan workshops, so we do have what our exercise, and you're welcome to attend these next ones that are coming to, tomorrow and on Saturday. And essentially we put out the maps. They're large scale maps. We break out into groups, and we have 6 or 7 people at each table. We have facilitators, and we go over. This is the map of the city. So we talk about, okay, this is what's existing. What do you want to see remain? What should go here? There's areas that's called opportunity areas, where there's vacant lots, or it's underdeveloped or what have you. And so we have the discussion of what do you think should happen in those areas. The next exercise is the map that we pull out is ward specific. So in our workshops, we're having these one in each ward as we're going along. So then we'll So last night we were up at the 7th ward, and so we had the map that just large-scale map, and so we did the same thing. And so kind of along your lines, we say, well, okay, there's this business or there's this development here. It doesn't really belong. What do we what do we do?
Yeah.
It's not appropriate. And so we're taking that inventory, and the next part of that exercise is, okay, what do we want to go in there to replace it? And so we're doing that citywide, as well. And so, and those exhibits are on the general plan website, as well.
What about a non-permitted business that's there now? Are they grandfathered in, or?
What do you mean by non?
I mean, they're not permitted in. Some guy went in there.
Well, if it doesn't exist, if it doesn't legally exist, it doesn't.
I mean,
permittedly
I
exist.
know, I've met your code enforcement officer. I think he's great. And I think he's going to really change things here in San Bernardino. I think you're going to get things done. But like I said, there's so many other places that need to be looked at. And to me, if I had over 20 years, it was a strip joint downtown. It wasn't permitted, but it's been running there for 20 years. They shouldn't be grandfathered in.
And you're right. And so you had mentioned the truck parking, the illegal truck parking, these, where there's large vacant lots, and we come to work on Monday and there's 100 trucks or trailers, stored there, sort of a thing. And it does, becomes a code enforcement matter, and then we have to kind of deal with it that way. But those are not allowed to be there, and they're not grandfathered at all. They're just, they're just someone that we have to
Kick out.
work with. Yes.
Okay. I think you answered my question.
Okay.
No, those were good questions. I mean, it is important to know that the specific plan is primarily focused on future uses, and existing uses are what they are, right? Okay. And
So if this is a discussion, so that's how I take this, correct? So I guess I'll start it off. North neighborhood, by the looks of what's permitted and conditional and prohibited, the idea is that it's more of a traditional residential with some types of commercial. First, sort of what Mr. Hernandez was leading to, I assume if it's an existing permitted use, in the future it's going to be existing non-conforming. And as long as the use continues, it can continue forever, basically.
Or if there's a sunset, but it will be addressed one way or the other.
And is there a discontinue use? So if business closed, is that a 6-month, 3-month period?
The way our code is written now is if you, it's a 1 year. It's a 1 year period.
Okay.
So if your license is expired for a year, you can't reestablish that same business. There's nothing that says it has to be a year. As part of our code update, we could make that. We could make that less. I mean, I've been in some cities where it's 30, where it's 3 months or 6 months. So it's up to us. A lot of it has to do with, sentiment of the community and the decision makers in terms of. There's a notion, well, we don't want to penalize people or punish them by saying, well, okay, you lose it because you haven't used it, kind of a thing. But there are some cases where, maybe it's an industrial kind of use. Or, as an example, we have a lot of existing in our downtown area. We have like automotive repair shops, kind of a thing, or along E Street. You'll see a lot of those. They start off as a smog shop. Next thing you know, they're doing brakes, and then there's transmission and all these other things. And so, but to answer your question, if someone's out of business, if they don't have an active business license, then it expires. And so that's something that we'll be looking at as well. And as you are correct when you're talking about the two districts that we're looking at now. As Karen had explained in our past workshops, we're coming in from the sides, in our intensities going towards the center of the donut, if you will.
Yeah.
And so in the northern areas, shaded in blue, you've got residential neighborhoods that are just above that. And so we want to be mindful of that transition. And so, there needs to be that separation between those areas and the core of the downtown, where you will see the taller, more dense buildings. And so that's why when we're looking at the north neighborhood, we envision that there's going to be a limited number of commercial uses and probably no industrial uses in those areas, because they're not compatible with the neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods.
Yeah, I totally get where you're going. So I'm agreeing, at least myself, on the north neighborhood, the way you listed the permitted uses. On the conditional uses, same with that. I assume, though, that perhaps maybe these conditional uses, is my opinion, that maybe these spaces are smaller because it's still residential. And as we get, as you said, towards the core, we go to the traditional square footages. So perhaps maybe in this area it's limited.
You mean in terms of square footage?
In terms
Size?
of square footage, size, footprint, number of parking spaces, because it's a transition. So
Are you referring to the conditional or, say, the neighborhood
the
retail?
conditional
Okay.
uses. And so we would allow them, but they're a little smaller than, let's say, the traditional, because it's still residential, but as we move to the core, then they become the traditional square footages, the national brand square footages and so forth. And the prohibited uses, I'm okay with that, and so those are my initial comments.
Yes.
Okay, so, am I on now? Okay. Okay, is there some consideration about types of business per population? And it kind of plays off of something you brought up, like, for instance, like tire shops. And there's quite a number of those, and some are small, but the one comment I would make about that is that they're not very clean. And they do create hazardous substances, and there's no, oversight, and especially within a close proximity of a neighborhood, residential neighborhood. So how is that, going to be handled? I know Carlsbad put a moratorium on hair salons because there were so many, but what about, all these automotive places that are just sprinkled all around the city that...
So that's for us to talk about. Where do they belong in the downtown specific plan, and if so, where?
Yeah, no.
No. So, well, I think maybe the freeway adjacent category, but still not the tire shops, right? Just automotive. So right now, the way that the code is written, it calls out automotive repair. A couple of them got combined. I apologize. And so we may, through this process, kind of elaborate on some of that as well. So, at any rate, I agree. So probably adding that to the list of prohibited uses for this area.
Well, also, I assume in some areas they'll be permitted, but I guess we could address that later when we do policy, because it could also be tied into training, code enforcement, exactly how to read or understand if a business is out of compliance. Because I assume that automotive operations have to do everything wholly within their building, and they're spilling outside their building. And so obviously you could drive down Fifth Street and you can see it all over the place. So, and that's how other cities are written. So.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah, we would agree with that. And like I said, if you go through the list, I'm going to, as you glance at it, you probably could just from a quick glance be able to cross out 15, 20 of them without really even giving it much thought, because it's not appropriate for the downtown area. Again, keeping in mind that a downtown area is traditionally what's the cliche, the pedestrian friendly, kind of thing, and so it's more walkable, and it's not really conducive, for somebody to go down and get their breaks done, in the downtown area where there should be, where it should be more of a commercial or entertainment or some restaurants or those kinds of things, and so we are. There are a lot of uses that just are not going to, they just don't belong in the downtown area, and so that's what we're doing here, and it may sound harsh at first, but it's I'll use my favorite term. We want it to look purdy, PIRDY.
Any other comments on the north neighborhoods? Great. All right, so now we move in.
Question.
Yes.
So just to be clear, based on this list, you're basically asking us if we're okay with most of them.
We're asking you if we're heading in the right direction. And it gives you a chance to say, what about the tire shops? Oh, yeah, we've got to make sure we call that out as prohibited.
Okay.
So this is just that first opportunity for you to give us input. We'll come back, we'll refine it. To the extent any of you go through what Oliver's been talking about, send that. We'll incorporate that as well, and we'll bring it back again to you.
And there's other, and if you look at the commercial uses, I know we're kind of picky on the the dirty industries, if you will, but there's the commercial uses also, so you have daycare facilities, where are those appropriate? Is that something that should be permitted in the entire downtown? Now we have adult daycare facilities that we're looking at now, where we're processing a project where it's for seniors where they come in for their daily medical treatment, kind of a thing. And so there's a vast number of different types of commercial businesses that may or may not be appropriate for the downtown area either. And so if we look at our second page, and where it talks about commercial uses and their service uses, then the first one is commercial uses, retail uses. So there's a mixture there, and then we'll we're here in a few moments we'll be getting into the conversation about, as mentioned earlier, the alcohol related uses, restaurants. At what point are restaurants with alcohol okay? And what is the review or discretionary process, if any, for those? If it's in some cities, if your restaurant is a certain size and it's you get Claim Jumper or Olive Garden or something like that, they don't come in for it. They sell alcohol, but they don't require a CUP, a conditional use permit. So at a certain point, up to what size restaurant or eating establishment does not require a conditional use permit, just go in by right. And so again, downtowns usually, the successful ones have a lot of restaurants, and so you don't really want to limit or deter that. I mean, that's what creates the vibrancy, where you have where you can go on one block and kind of restaurant hop if you want, so to speak. And so kind of be mindful of that. Sometimes it's easy to look at these uses in a vacuum, but then again, try to keep in mind that we're looking at the entire, downtown, and we're breaking it up in areas too. So maybe the concentration of restaurants with alcohol more towards the core is appropriate, and not as much, on the peripheries. And I think that's what was suggested here, in the neighborhood, in the northern neighborhoods, is that, well, maybe they shouldn't be up in that area because they're too close to the residences that are up there.
Just one comment on that. Since we're going to cross things out, my thought was, as I'm looking at the more detailed list, is to maybe put an asterisk or something beside it for limited.
Meaning like we specify a certain size that might be okay.
Right.
Or we limit the range of uses.
Or the number,
Yeah.
like an adult daycare. I mean, I don't see any problem with that in the north area. I don't know why it would be in downtown. So I would say I would call that limited.
Well, we're going to get to the downtown, and that's going to have its own list.
Okay.
So that's where it wouldn't even show up as a permitted use, if that's the way the group feels.
But on ABC licenses, you can't limit them. I mean, some crossover within, 100 feet. I mean, there's, as long as they go through the ABC license, go through this conditional use permit, and obviously nobody comes and opposes the project, there's pretty much permitted, and as long as they follow all the ABC rules, correct?
Okay.
So in fairness, this is just an overview, and obviously we could take this home, be more detailed, and send you our detailed list, because, if we follow your directions right now, like daycare, I assume it also means residential daycare, not limited to a sort of a commercial space, right? Is that correct?
Well, that's the other thing too. We have the where it's a 6 or under, kind of thing. So we'll need to approach that, and we may have to get our legal team to explore what our limitations are on that. And there's other what do they call those, where it's recovery homes, kind of a thing. So we have those, for adults, that come in where there's 6 or fewer. The
And
group,
there's new state laws or
group,
mandates,
the group homes and things, and so we have to be mindful of state law as well on how far we can go in regulating these. But kind of to answer your earlier comment, this is we're just scratching the surface here tonight, on this, and we'll, as we continue with the meetings, we'll dive into these a little bit more in detail, and ultimately within the next several meetings, we'll hopefully be at a point where we can say, okay, what final recommendations or buy-off will you have on these items, and then we could take that to the council for kind of like we did with our vision statement.
Okay. All righty. So on to the North Gateway. So within this category, we are looking. There are a few single-family homes up there, not very many. So any residential will mostly probably fall in the multifamily category. Commercial retail services along the corridors. Restaurants without alcohol, office financial services, and then some of the other conditional uses. Maybe you allow a gas station car wash. I'd like your input on that. Hotels, motels, should those be conditional there? Or do we try and have those locate within the downtown core or the transit neighborhoods? So just another option. I mean, the other way to think about this is, we want to create some synergy in the downtown with respect to how the uses come together and cluster. And so there is some thought that if you allow everything everywhere, then really nothing, of substance happens. There are no nodes created. So we want to keep that in mind. So I'm asking for your input on the conditional and then even on the prohibited uses. So I've got the automotive sales, repair, and rental on that category.
Once the development code gets being developed, myself personally would like to get rid of alleys in this area. There is some alleys that do cover and have a policy of people want to get rid of them because basically they're crime places for people to get in, and in the old days they would use them for bringing in the horse through the backyard, instead of coming through the front. They had 35-foot wide lots. So if we could take a look at that.
We'll have a chance to talk about those, not the next meeting, but the meeting after that.
Okay.
We're going to talk about parking and circulation all night.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Quick question, just for the meeting itself. Somebody texted me saying that the live isn't working. Is it?
So unfortunately, tonight, the live link is not working, so we will upload the video probably on Monday. It'll go up.
Okay.
I just had a suggestion regarding the prohibited use.
Yes.
I just feel like with it being in the middle of two neighborhood areas, that drive-through restaurants should be allowed, especially if we're going to have like motels and hotels in that area.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, aren't they kind of designated in that corridor on 5th Street, right off the freeway there for drive-through restaurants?
Well, that's in a separate district. So
Right.
they're definitely going to be allowed there. But I think our thinking had been, let's let them happen nearer the freeway so that you've got more uses that are supporting the neighborhoods in a more positive way.
We've got bars and restaurants, and there's a lot of little places that could fall into that category where you could go out and, get some food easily, I think. Don't you think?
I agree. I just feel like just with neighborhoods being in the surrounding areas, if that's going to be like a corridor for East Street, at least, a few drive-through restaurants.
Well, I'm not for them, but because I think they're right where they should be right now.
Any other thoughts?
Well, the
on that?
only thing I have a question about is hotels and motels. There's a type of this kind of product, I guess, that is, it looks a little smaller, more upscale. It's a different kind of thing than the blocks that they're building, like along Hospitality Lane, because all of that's available. It just depends on what it looks like, honestly. If it blends into the neighborhood and gives you a neighborhood feeling, I don't have a problem with it. I just don't like those blocks or those things that look like strip malls. going in, so.
Well, and some cities also differentiate between hotels and motels, and so that's definitely an option. And because they are different by design. And so I don't know if that's kind of what you're getting at. I mean, when I'm listening to you describe that, I'm picturing Palm Springs, right? You've got your residential right up next to a 1950s motor court hotel.
We've got a couple of those here in San
Do you?
Bernardino. Yes, we do. There's one on D Street, because sometimes I see it's really cute. It's like an old motor motel. But yeah, something more like that, so it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb.
Okay, good. Any other thoughts about any of these other uses on here that you want to share with us tonight? I'm sorry?
Can you define the shaded area just for the record, because we can't see where exactly that is?
Oh, yeah.
The bottom,
Is 5th Street on the bottom, it's 8th Street on the top, and then we've got E Street to the left, and I think that's
You said 8th Street on top?
Arrowhead.
8.
Okay.
and then in between D Street and Arrowhead on the right side.
No, it's not quite Arrowhead, so is that, you just mentioned D. Is it D?
And it follows parcel lines.
It's halfway, it's halfway, it splits D and Arrowhead.
Okay.
So Arrowhead is actually in District 1.
Okay, great, then let's keep going. Now, we've got our freeway commercial. This is the designation where we recognize that we've got uses that are oriented to the freeway, whether they are the drive-through restaurants or the automotive sales like the Fairview. And there's going to be a whole range of new development happening there as well that's going to be doing the same thing. So we're acknowledging it, and permitted uses include the automotive sales, commercial retail and services, drive-through, office, and then we've got some conditional uses listed there. There's only a handful of residential in that location. We're not suggesting that necessarily be something that is a good thing, given the range of uses and given that they're next to a freeway. So I don't think we want to encourage it in the future. We're showing it as conditional, but it could also be and I guess I have it in both locations, don't I? I've got it conditional as multifamily and then prohibited residential. So I'll let you weigh in on that.
I've seen rental on there a couple of times. Is there something like, expound on that? Because a lot of car dealerships will have that area, a rental area, especially if it's near a body shop.
So we had the asterisk there, not part of a dealership, knowing that some car places do have their own rental on site. This would be a standalone rental. Yeah. But anyway, I would be interested in your thoughts about the residential component and whether or not we want to allow that in this location.
I don't think it's a great idea. It's just not, I mean, it gets very industrial looking around auto dealerships and very traffic heavy, so, and noisy.
Any other thoughts?
The only area that residential may occur, and we've talked about, in our earlier workshops, we talked about allowing for a little bit of an overlap between districts, so there isn't, even though our exhibits show a hard line, but as an example, if we look at this little step that comes up here, that encompasses a residential neighborhood kind of a thing, and so maybe if someone wanted to acquire that and reestablish residential there, it might be something that we would be receptive to allowing, and maybe that's a discretionary process. What we talked about earlier, that a case like that would be something that maybe would require the Planning Commission to approve because it's kind of straddling two different districts, kind of a thing. But But you're right. I mean, the bulk of it, I mean, essentially, most of Fifth Street's going, we already have development proposals for there. You know, we have the In-N-Out Burger, we have we have some other, the Gateway project has been approved. I mean, so that's already pretty much spoken for. We have Panda Express, that's on the, that's on the southern side of Fifth Street. And then we've got the dealership, Ford dealership from Second that goes up north. And so there really only is, 2 or 3 properties in the middle that anything could really go in, realistically. And so, maybe housing wouldn't be appropriate there anyway, just as a thought.
Well, I kind of agree with your idea, that little step up, because at one time when the agency bought the property is on Fifth Street, the idea was to try to do residential there, sort of a mixed-use project, and obviously In-N-Out came in, and obviously that other project across the street. So, well, we saw that piece of property that is basically between G and F Street that butts up against a motel that's still vacant, and I'm not sure if anything is going in there, but it's quite possible that residential could go on the second floor if it was a mixed-use project. So I would say the multifamily should stay as long as it's, was that multifamily? Yeah, multifamily. And also, it's possible that some of these properties can convert into something else in the future. So I would think hotel should be allowed if that was the case, especially since it's off the freeway. We have one already on, I think it's on just below 6th Street, just between 5th and 6th Street on 8th Street. So there's a hotel there. I can't remember the name of the hotel, but so I think that should be also added, just for the fact if a property converts into something else.
I had a question. So I was looking through, I know we're going one by one, but I looked through most of the districts. For the automotive sales, repair, and rental, most of them are in the prohibited use section. I guess if we were going to think about that, where would you recommend that they go?
I think we've got them under the rail adjacent. Oh, do we? I mean, that's.
I think in reality, as part of our general plan and the zoning code, probably the more appropriate place for them is south of Rialto, outside of the downtown area. Right.
All right. So I think I'll go ahead and move on to the transit neighborhood. Permitted uses, of course, include the multifamily, either in a standalone building or a mixed-use building, the full range of commercial retail services that are neighborhood serving, restaurants with alcohol, the idea that this would be a permitted use, and then educational, cultural, recreation uses, office uses. Under the conditional category, live entertainment, maybe a brewery, distillery is a conditional use. A social service facility would be a conditional use in case that wants to come in somewhere within this area. And then under prohibited, the industrial, the automotive, gas stations, drive-thrus. You already have a number of drive-thrus along 2nd Street. And, the question is, how many more do you need in your downtown? And are there other places for them? So you've got some of your major development opportunities along 2nd Street there. So
just out of curiosity, on breweries and distilleries, are you going to require sales of food, or is it just alcohol consumption?
That's a good question. and well, that's earlier when I was mentioning establishments with alcohol. So you have ABC has their regulations. Your license type depends on whether or not you sell alcohol, whether or not you have entertainment, how much alcohol. How much food You know, is it really, what's the term? Bona fide restaurant. You know, if you just have chips and salsa out there, that's not a restaurant. You know, there has to be a full menu. You have to be a bona fide restaurant. You have to be open restaurant hours. In other words, usually you have to be open by lunchtime. You know, kind of thing. You can't be one of these restaurants that opens up at 9 o'clock at night. Yes, you sell food, but you're really a bar or nightclub, you know, kind of a thing. So there are distinctions, and so you know, with these you know, breweries and these kinds of things that we're seeing more and more now, you know, where it's you know, so that's certainly something it's not on our list now, right. You know, but there are some items that we because you know 1992 was the last time our list was created, and so there's a lot of things that have new use types that have occurred in these last few years that we'll be adding to those. So that's another alcohol related use that we'll be looking at, you know, and so we were envisioning that type of use. I think that was in areas 8 and 9. Is that correct?
In 8 for sure, but you know, you could have smaller ones.
Right.
And
we get inquiries about those all the time. You know,
yeah.
here at our counter, you know, especially, you know, in the downtown area, we have a lot of these smaller vacant buildings, and people want to come in and they say, well, I want to do a brewery or something. You know, it's not even really where they have a full scale operation. You know, it's just kind of like a pub kind of a thing. And so so that's something to contemplate also. You know, it's just like you know, so when you come up with, well, how about this? You know, how about this type? You know, how about, you know, that's what we're asking you to do also with this thing. If there are types of businesses that you don't see on the list, you know, jot those down as well, because you know, if there's something that we either want to include, or they're a new type of business or industry and we don't want to allow them, that's another aspect to look at as well.
And I'm not seeing, I'm sure it's supposed to be there, but I'm not seeing like retail shops.
Commercial retail, that's it. The second bullet, like retail shops, yeah. Yeah.
And those uses are on the bottom of the first page. It says commercial retail on this table.
Yeah.
It's down on the bottom.
Any other input on that one?
I just feel like in this area, probably prohibiting like commercial cannabis facilities in that area.
I don't know that we can, but
You know, and you've already got, 3 gas stations on there, so do you need more, right? That would be the thinking.
price is yes.
Oh, yeah.
But that raises a question. So our code does not address alternative fuel stations. You know, so what if someone comes in, instead of putting a gas station, you know, you can pull up and plug in your electric vehicle or your what other, you know, compressed, you know, gas, whatever they are, you know, kind of a thing. So like I said earlier, you know, so service stations have evolved also. You know, it's not just gasoline and diesel anymore. You know, and so as we're looking at our development code, you know, we're having a lot of existing centers and businesses coming in and say, well, I need to put some charging stations in my parking lot. So our code doesn't address that right now, and so we're kind of dealing with those on a case by case basis. And so so is it a gas station that we have an issue with, or what if it's a plug-in facility? You know, and those may look different than what a gas station. You know, so there's you know, so we just have to be mindful of those different types of items.
Don't we already have one of those somewhere in San Bernardino, close to downtown? I mean, I don't know how many cars you can plug in before you crash the system, but
I've seen them standalone in parking lots, like a Target
Yeah.
parking lot will have its own
And then
area.
they pay whatever the going rate is to do that, I assume, instead of buying gas, or? So is there like a tax on it? How much can we make off of it?
Those are very good questions. And we've been tossing that around also, because if I own a commercial property, right? Let's say it's an office building, let's say, right? And I put in charging stations because, you know, I hire a lot of millennials, and they all got electric vehicles, so I make it a convenience for my employees, right, to plug in while they're at work, kind of a thing. And let's say that we're not charging them, you know, it's part of our business. But we have others where they say, well, you know what, I've got this commercial center, I've got 50 spaces, I'm going to put charging stations in 25 of them, right? Just an example. And it's going to be open to the public, so anyone can go in there, anyone can plug in, and you're good to go. Now, is that a separate business? That's what we're asking ourselves. It's like, well, okay, that's kind of, it's a fueling station. You know, it's open to the public. It's not just the customers. I mean, if you go to Target and you plug in, that might be something different, right? That, you know, it's not really, you're not necessarily in the business to charge vehicles, but if you're you know, a different commercial use, and you just have a parking lot so anyone can just drive in there, you don't have to be a customer of the store or anything else, you're just using the charging station, you know, now is that a...
Those are the things that Oliver gets to worry about.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to move on.
Well, I'm worrying about it right now. I mean, that's
Sorry, I know.
Imagine made me think about it. You're the one that doesn't like gas stations, not me.
Are we going to fight over this? Okay, let's move on.
One thing I'd like to add in the when you're doing your development standards is the electric takes longer to fuel. I mean, I park my Prius Prime and it takes me 6-7 hours on a 120 volt system. So I don't have the luxury of having 240 to plug into, but it does take longer. So you're going to have more cars parked there, sitting, getting charged. So that's one thing I hope the city takes into consideration of what time it does take.
Right.
So.
Okay, we're moving into the downtown core. So keep in mind everything Oliver said about ramping it up in terms of what we're trying to do in the downtown. So we've got a wide range of uses allowed that we're proposing to allow. Of course, we've got to allow for the institutional, which are the county and other kinds of city civic uses. Educational, public assembly, recreation uses, full range of commercial retail that are community serving, not heavy commercial, like the tire service place. Offices, multifamily, hotels, bars, restaurants with alcohol, brewery, distillery, conditional uses, and this is to be discussed. I mean, I don't know if you've got different categories of live entertainment, but maybe there's different categories.
I like live entertainment.
Okay.
But
would you like it to be conditional?
But you used to be able to go, like in downtown Denver, there would be like a jazz trio or something.
Well, that's so. There's a few things to keep in mind here. You know, now we're at the middle of the donut here. That's our most intense area of the downtown. So the density for residential is higher. The square footage for commercial use is greater, and the buildings are also taller, right? So you come in with I don't remember what the height limitation is, how many stories
Unlimited.
It's unlimited. Okay, so now we get into this. I have a 20-story building, right? And in that building, I'm going to have residential lofts. I'm going to have a couple of restaurants. I'm going to have a care facility for either guests, employees, or whatever, or neighboring businesses. You can do a lot of things in a 20-story building. It doesn't have to be all office or all houses. You know, that's I guess the term mixed use as we've been starting to hear. And so now we have to start thinking that. So if we say, we kind of start thinking about it. Well, okay, Oliver, you have 7 floors of residential. That's permitted, but you're going to have you're going to have an entertainment facility in there. That's going to require CUP because, you know, so do you want to mix and match, entitlements and approval process, I don't know that you want to do that. And so is there a difference between a standalone nightclub and a nightclub that's within a 20-story building? That's also included with 4 or 5 other restaurants. And so those are things that we'll have to contemplate as we go through this. And so initially say, well, no, no alcohol, or yes, alcohol. Well, what else is happening? And obviously you don't want your nightclub to be next to your daycare center on the next floor or whatever. But there's some common sense things that we'll be able to address, and we through this process we'll be looking to your guidance to make recommendations of Planning Commission, ultimately the City Council, in terms of, okay, when we're looking at these things, staff and city, consider these things, consider these items to be, as you're evaluating these proposals, because it is going to be a mix. I mean, our vision is to, I think what you'll be hearing, the vision for the redevelopment of the Carousel Mall, we're looking at a 10, 12-year, period, for build out. That only happens if we have an aggressive program of what we're suggesting. So the goal is that if we could agree early on what we would allow to occur and how it should occur, then it makes it easier for it to actually happen.
So I have a question on that unlimited building size.
Height.
Okay. What would be the benefit of having a 20-story building in downtown?
I don't know if there's a disadvantage of having one in the downtown. It's I think there isn't a traditional downtown in the United States or the world that doesn't have tall buildings. There's other factors here in San Bernardino. We're kind of close to this little crack in the earth. So there's some considerations. We have an airport that's next to us, as well. So we'll have to be mindful of that. And so there are environmental matters that need to be considered. But we're trying to recreate San Bernardino, and specifically the downtown. If you listen to the presentation by Dr. Chris Thornburg, when he was talking about the opportunity that we have for economic development here, if you heard that speech, and it's like, when he said we can compare ourselves to Minneapolis and some of these larger downtowns, it's like, well, yeah, we should. We should compare ourselves to that, and this is how we do it.
If you were to get a 20-story building in downtown, things would be happening. I mean,
yeah, I'm not saying I'm against it.
It would mean that downtown is on the map.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not saying I'm against it. I just want to know what kind of 20-story. I mean, I guess we have made a point over and over throughout this process that we're going to be kind of sensitive to the architecture and the era. The era being a lot of it primarily old Spanish style. And, I assume that includes that even if we put up 20-story buildings and there's some beautiful old historic buildings, that they would be protected so we could keep that personality of what San Bernardino once was, the orchards and the Spanish-style, hacienda-style houses. So that we would have a personality separate from Minneapolis or wherever.
Yeah, I think we can talk about architecture next go around, and what that means, and what we want to limit, if anything, in the downtown, aside from just requiring high quality architecture that's true to the architectural style that's selected, right? I mean, there's something as broad as that down to identifying the kind of styles that would be encouraged. So I think it would be really important once we get there to hear from potential developers about that as well. So what we don't want to do is prematurely set any barriers in place that, by picking a style that just doesn't work for a 20-story building, for example. So
One question, from the last meeting, I added up the total neighborhood, the transit neighborhood and the downtown core. We're talking 9,600 units to 13,500 units. That's a lot of units downtown in between these two areas. And it's going to be pretty crowded unless they all take the train into LA or Redlands. So it's going to be I'm still trying to swallow those numbers. So, we can all plan on those numbers, and then affordability. Are these going to cost $3,000 for rent? It's going to be pretty tough for a man working, even earning $50 an hour to pay that rent bill. So it's got to be affordable too.
So the topic of affordability will come up in the implementation section when we'll talk about that. Yeah.
I do have a question going back to the live entertainment for the conditional uses.
Yeah.
So, forgive me, I'm not quite understanding. So if he has a 20-story building, wants to hold a concert in there, does that mean he has to get a permit for every concert he holds?
No, it would be part of the approval of the building with that use in it. So there would probably be conditions. You couldn't do it on a weeknight, for example, or you had to be done by a certain amount of, by a certain hour, that kind of thing. That's what we mean by conditions.
Yeah, and in terms of Oliver's comment, I don't see a problem with a 20-story building with multiple uses, because I'm sure when it's designed, it's going to be designed in a way vertically and horizontally where some of the uses don't mix, because elevator core, stairwells and whatnot. I've been to hotels where, you have a nightclub and retail, commercial and residential, and some of them don't even mix. I never see the residential people. So I'm sure the developer will keep in mind on how to circulate people and direct them to the appropriate parking areas and exits and whatnot. So.
Okay, we'll move on then. The County Civic Center, this is pretty straightforward. The existing uses aren't changing. It's just they're going to be adding that new building with underground parking. So we're suggesting here, of course, keeping the institutional uses, office, public assembly, allowing for some supporting commercial services. They'd like to do a small cafe on the ground floor that faces Arrowhead. And then also a daycare. That could be an allowed use within that area. Conditional uses would be any more social service facilities. There's just been a concern that perhaps continuing to allow them all to be happening in downtown might just be an overconcentration. And then prohibited uses, residential or industrial.
I would say,
go ahead.
yeah, for this, restaurants, definitely, if we're going to have employees, they're definitely going to want to not walk that far. So that's what I would recommend.
You mean having restaurants be a permitted use?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's what's meant by commercial services. I'll just make that clear. Yes, absolutely.
I'm thinking that the county is typically tied directly with social services facilities, but how do you limit through conditional uses the number of social services facilities? If we can't limit them, I just say it's a prohibited use.
We'll continue to examine that. But also keep in mind that the county, on county properties, they do not require a city approval.
So we can try. We can try. All right. Speaking of county property, let's move on to their next chunk of land here. This is the surface parking lots with the buildings that are going to be torn down and then congregated on the other site. And so the county will be looking to find a developer or 2 or 3 to develop this. So at this point, we're suggesting it's multifamily, standalone, or in a mixed-use building, supporting neighborhood commercial services, institutional uses, and offices that would primarily be permitted in this location. with conditional uses being a college or a trade school that might want to locate. It's, there's just a lot of land there. Bars, live entertainment establishments, social service facility. Prohibited uses, drive-through restaurants, industrial, transportation, automotive, sales, repair. We're thinking about the adjacent neighborhoods. Any thoughts there? Okay. The rail adjacent area. As you know, this is currently where there are industrial uses. There's also the Department of Homeland Security. You've got a mixture of some other uses down there, and some land that is, needs to be cleaned before it can be built upon. So permitted uses, limited industrial with the focus on clean industries, R&D, startups, artisan maker spaces. Some of these uses currently don't exist in the zoning code, so we're going to add them and define them. But this is the kind of mix of uses that would be ideal in this location, and we'd like to encourage it. Office and institutional uses, of course, brewery, distillery. On the conditional side, we're suggesting hotels, motels, commercial retail and services. I think the idea is you've only got so much potential for retail, especially the kind of retail that you want in a downtown. See if you can get it happening in the core or the transit neighborhood, but not along here. And then any kind of heavy industrial uses would be prohibited going forward. And that would include the outdoor storage and the processing like you were asking about, Richard. And then the other idea is that you explicitly call out sensitive uses because it would be adjacent to a railroad, such as schools, daycare, congregate care. Those would most likely be prohibited in this area.
I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question, but I guess in your professional experience, if you limit the permitted uses, do you have a better chance of attracting those uses than? So if we just concentrate, obviously here, we're really trying to push this artisan thing and hopefully clean industry, R&D, and breweries and distilleries. If we just limit it to those permitted uses, maybe a few conditional uses, I mean, are other places successful in attracting these uses?
Well, the good thing is that we're looking at the city as a whole at the same time, so we'll be able to have that conversation. Are there other locations where these kinds of concentrations of uses can happen? I'd say yes. But keep in mind, this area is going to be desirable. If the downtown emerges to be this place that we're envisioning, this area is going to be a very desirable area. So you don't want to give it up for the heavy industrial uses.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I'm thinking R&D, perhaps maybe we attract somebody who pays higher wages. So if we limit those uses to these areas, hopefully that would make them as a draw to come to this area because of everything that's happening.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that maybe you wouldn't allow those uses everywhere else.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Good. Okay. And then finally, the transit center itself, as you know, that does have the one pad that is going to be developed at some point. Could be multifamily. We're also suggesting student housing would be an appropriate use there, office, supporting commercial services, and of course transit facilities. Other potential uses that could come in that area could be a college, trade school, daycare is often located near transit stations, restaurants, bars with alcohol. Okay.
That looks good to me. Anybody have any comments?
And you're free to send more. We'll expect them. So now we get to move on to the last agenda item tonight. We've got the RDICO team here, and they have some, have a video? You're doing your video?
Yes.
Okay, we've got a video, and then they're here to answer any questions you have.
I think if we could start with just a little brief introduction, if that's okay. Great. Oh, I'm just realizing I just drove back this afternoon from San Diego at the CRE PropTech conference, which is really quite exciting because it's really technology around real estate. And we spent a good amount of time talking about San Bernardino and the opportunity. And we came back with some really cool ideas that time would not allow us to present tonight. But first of all, Don Monty, part of the RDICO team, pleased to be here tonight. And just want to start out by saying congratulations to the hard work that this committee is doing. Oliver, Karen, the PlaceWorks team, the entire city staff. This is a milestone that was accomplished last Wednesday, and as Karen said, it's time to put pedal to the metal and get the show on the road here. So, you know, we're that hole in the donut that Oliver described. So I just want to bring out a couple of points before we show our presentation, but I think some of the points that were brought out tonight were really great discussion points, and if it's okay, I'd like to start out with the first one, breweries, okay? I've done a lot of research on breweries, and there are types of breweries. You want what we call neighborhood breweries. You want something that, you know, isn't open till 5 in the morning where people just go there to, you know, go out and throw cans of beer on the street. Neighborhood brewery is something that can be discussed further, but there's appropriate breweries for downtown. The second thing I want to bring out is when we talk about vehicles, cars, I think one of the things that could be considered for residential use is putting in part of the code mandated zip car rentals, where to drive the use of cars down by saying if you're going to build a residential building, you need to provide a percentage of zip car electric rental cars so that, you know, families may not need 2 cars. If you need it for an hour or 2, you rent it and you bring it back. So again, there's ways of driving car usage down by just thinking about it. The next thing was, it was mentioned about Dr. Thornburg and his presentation. The one thing you can never have too much of in a downtown is people. It's people that create safety. It's people that drive retail. It's people that drive restaurants. You can never have enough rooftops. So what Thornburg said is you need to create what we call dense job zones. And for every job you create, you need to create 1 housing unit. So just something to consider with the gentleman that mentioned the concern about density. Yes, there is a concern, but keep in mind you've got 24,000 people that drive to work every day in government buildings here and drive home at night. That could be a 3-hour round trip and maybe more. Offer them a downtown to live in, and all of a sudden you can actually reduce traffic by having people walk to work. The next thing is affordable housing. Big topic. One of the things I mentioned yesterday at one of the discussions that were held is, let's call it attainable housing. Let's just give it a different name, because a lot of people get their backs up with affordable housing. But we're going to focus, certainly in that hole of the donut, on what we call the missing middle. And this is a big priority for us to make that happen. There are so many ways of controlling costs. And one of them, as Oliver mentioned earlier, is when you have a form-based code, developers are like the stock market. They like certainty. If you can come in and have an as-of-right use and not spend 2 years through an approval process and spend millions of dollars unnecessarily that get passed on to who? The person living there. So this as-of-right, this form-based code, this immediate certainty that you bring to the development community, they will come. I promise you. I'm a developer. I will come. The next thing is, I guess, really to talk about what we're about to show you this evening. And, you know, we feel that some of the commercial uses that were discussed here, the concepts that we have talked to people about here, this could be the hottest city in the country, and I mean it. And why? Because you've got all the bones here. You've got everything is here to say this is a city. The only thing that's not here is there's nobody living here. Like at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, you walk the streets here, and what do? You can't wait to get from where you're walking to where you're going. Why? Because I would feel that way. You need activity. But you've got the potential here. And all we're saying is that from a developer point of view, and what I'm saying that this city has done that very few cities do, they seek developer input. We're the folks that build this stuff. And if you come up with something that we say, well, we can't build this or we can't do this, then it's a do-over. So I commend Oliver and PlaceWorks for seeking developer input in what is going to be your downtown. So commercial uses, eds and meds, educational, medical, those are the anchors of downtowns today. Then you talk about innovation districts and movie industry. There's so many things that could go on here. The sleeper in this downtown is the Harris Building. That could be enormously the potential for that building. Now, we don't control that. That's not part of the Carousel Mall. But the Harris Building is waiting for uses to come in. Indoor marketplace, you name it, and it's there. High ceilings, open floor space, live workplaces. The outside of the Harris Building, years ago, we looked it up, there were windows there. That building became windowless. But all you got to do is somebody with a strong arm just push and you'll have windows again. They're all there. So you could create exterior live, interior work spaces. So the possibilities are endless here. So, you know, with that, I think what we'd like to show you tonight is concepts. And when I say concepts, I mean this is not done. Nobody can say this is what is going to get built. In the industry, we've always heard real estate being driven by location, location, location. Okay, that's important. But what people don't realize is what gets built is really determined by market, market, market. The market dictates what gets built. If you do the right form-based code and you allow the market to come in here and determine what gets built, you will have a feeding frenzy here that has never been envisioned by anyone. So with that, I don't know, Ernie, do you want to say a few words, or do we want to get right into the concept video? And please, when I say concept, I mean it. Nothing is in stone here. This is a vision for your downtown. And sorry for the early sound bites that you heard from us earlier. It could be we were so anxious to show you what we were going to present here tonight, but sorry for those early interruptions.
Ernie, is it that one?
I think it's the middle one, yes.
The entire RDICO team is extremely excited to provide the following presentation that demonstrates the enormous potential for this long-awaited redevelopment of the Carousel Mall property in downtown San Bernardino. And now, introducing Gian Twerkin, co-principal of RDICO.
Hello, my name is Gian Twerkin, co-principal along with Don Monti of the RDICO group. We are extremely excited and pleased at the progress that we have made with the city since the beginning of our ENA and would like to present to you some concept plans for the Carousel Mall project. The following is a PowerPoint presentation that we've created for your viewing. With that, I'd like to introduce to you Gerhard Meyer, architect. Gerhard?
Thank you, Gian. This rendering here shows only a sketch of the new city. We will co-create that with you in detail. There'll be a lot of housing for sure, but also supporting retail, entertainment, and commercial uses, all as determined by market demand. We envision active sidewalks with high-quality streetscapes, distinct neighborhood districts with a unique architectural character, and perhaps even with different tree species. The most impactful step towards sustainability will be to reduce vehicle miles traveled by making the city walkable. We'll use the latest green technologies and strategies, and as you can see, we plan for green roofs on most new structures. Imagine farm-to-table food served in local restaurants with produce coming from the building's roof. And now, I would like to discuss some preliminary development timetables over the projected 12-year build-up period. As we have mentioned on numerous occasions, the goal is to get a shovel in the ground as soon as possible. In our initial analysis, and in further discussions with potential development partners, the consensus appears to be that early development is likely to occur on property adjacent to the existing parking structures. This would alleviate self-parking requirements that could otherwise economically prevent this early development from occurring. Beyond this projected early phase of development, future phases will then be determined by market demand. What we are showing now is what could be development patterns over the next 12 years that, which I must emphasize again, are subject to market-driven adjustments. What you are now seeing demonstrates what exists today and what future development patterns could look like throughout the next 8 projected build-out phases over a 12-year development period. Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, filling up the northern edge of the site nicely. We expect to construct the Riverwalk during Phase 4, Phase 5, Phase 6, Phase 7, and Phase 8 then completes the entire new downtown area on the small site. We strongly believe that with continued collaboration between the city, community stakeholders, and the RDICO team, as well as with the adoption of the much talked about form-based zoning code, that what we have shown here is absolutely feasible, even if not necessarily in the order that we have conceptualized it. Ethan Elkins is the genius behind this effort, and he can tell you a few words about it.
Thank you, Gerhard. Hello, my name is Ethan Elkins, and I manage digital solutions for the RDICO project. We have taken 3D modeling and rendering to new levels with our best-of-breed solutions and deep domain knowledge of the area to create compelling representations of the potential of this dynamic region in Southern California. What you see here are some renderings of our initial site plan using Twinmotion software by Unreal Engine. As RDICO works with the city, its planning team, community stakeholders, and national developers to add details to the form-based zoning code and overall conceptual development plan for the Carousel Mall's redevelopment, you will see more of the urban fabric envisioned for downtown San Bernardino, such as local farmers markets and the addition of shade trees, as Gerhard previously mentioned, as we reach each milestone of our performance schedule. And now, I will turn it back to Gerhard Meyer, who will show you some precedent imagery for discussion with the city.
Thank you, Ethan. What inspires us in the creation of a new downtown on the mall site are, of course, the various successful examples we can find locally and regionally. This is an example from Glendale, the Americana at Brand. By the way, our design for San Bernardino also includes a number of similar local parks. This slide shows an example from further up north, Santana Row in San Jose. Santana Row also offers us good examples for very nice walkable environments. So perhaps in the future, the streetscapes in San Bernardino can look a little bit more like this one from Santana Row in San Jose. The premier example for successful local placemaking on a grand scale is, of course, Playa Vista. It is quite a bit larger than the Carousel Mall, but if you close your eyes, one can imagine some of these images from Playa also becoming part of the new downtown San Bernardino. The 2009 vision plan by AECOM for the downtown in San Bernardino generously included water in the downtown. Again, we agree, and there is funding out there to support this. Lots of locations and owners are struggling now, looking for how to adapt their existing assets to the new norm. You are in the enviable position to start a new city almost from scratch, because here in San Bernardino, you'll get to define the new norm with few legacy constraints and point us all in a positive direction forward. If we were to use an assumption of $275 per square foot for overall development costs, spread over 4.5 million square feet, subject to further verification, of course, this would result in an overall project cost of $1.25 billion. $1.25 billion. With regards to a construction timetable, this could be soon, but it will be entirely dependent upon the adoption of a form-based zoning code, as well as the elements of a finally negotiated disposition and development agreement. And now, I would like to turn this over to our project manager, Ernesto Hidalgo, who will review some additional relevant facets of the project. Ernesto?
Thank you, Gerhard, and thank you, City of San Bernardino, Gian, and Don, for bringing this long-awaited development from the point of merely being a dream to the point of actually becoming a reality. Downtown San Bernardino is on the epicenter of an opportunity zone, which affords enormous investment opportunities for developers and capital markets to focus on. The Carousel Mall's redevelopment alone represents an opportunity for the creation of 27,000 primary and secondary construction job years. Many of those new living wage and high-paying jobs, such as what you see here, will enable San Bernardino residents, through proper job training and apprenticeship programs, to not only participate in this overall redevelopment, but also to have the opportunity of actually living there. In addition, there will be thousands of permanent jobs created, along with unlimited entrepreneurial opportunities. You've heard repeatedly that the time to think big and bold is now. What you see in front of you is big, bold, and attainable. We have studied the potential maximum theoretical build-out scenario for the Carousel Mall property, which can be accommodated in our conceptual plan as follows. 4,000 residential units totaling approximately 3.25 million square feet. A myriad of commercial uses, as shown here, totaling approximately 750,000 square feet. Retail, restaurant, entertainment, and experiential uses totaling approximately 575,000 square feet, for a total build-out potential of 4.575 million square feet on the Carousel Mall property alone, with the potential for an additional 8 to 10 million square feet of development in the entire downtown specific plan area, which could, by itself, satisfy San Bernardino's regional housing needs assessment goals. And how about the inclusion of many of these features that help to create an entire ecosystem with no species left out, such as food labs, food courts, arts festivals, outdoor events, and much more, including the potential to bring to San Bernardino WaterFire, which was born in Providence, Rhode Island, and is now in various major cities, attracting several thousand visitors to each event. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Gian Torkin and Donald Monti to share their closing remarks.
Thank you, Ernesto. Well, I hope you've enjoyed and found the information informative. I wanted to end this with introducing you to Don Monti, my partner, for some closing remarks.
Thanks, Gian. As you can see from this presentation, there is tremendous opportunity for the city of San Bernardino. Gian and I, along with our entire RDICO team, look forward to continuing to work in partnership with the city to realize the potential that exists for this project. Thank you. So, apologies for Gian not being here. He had surgery on his knee, so he's recuperating. Also, Gerhard Meyer, who is the major presenter in this, is, please stand up, Gerhard, who's done an amazing job. And, of course, everybody knows Ernesto Hidalgo, our project manager. Again, concepts, that's all we wanted to present, and here to answer questions.
Actually, I'd just like to make a comment. I thought it was so sad the way San Bernardino had been almost stripped of total personality and completely neglected. But now I see that's a benefit because technically it's a blank slate to build something far more fantastic than already having to deal with an established personality.
That's a great point. And one of the things that Gerhard mentioned, which is really critical, is that we are in an environment that we call the new norm. And there are many cities that need to adapt to that new norm in retrofitting buildings and doing certain things that will never be the same as building to the new norm. You can build all the buildings to the new norm and create a city that's so far ahead of everyone else. Just do it right. That's it. And you can do it right with this fabulous team that you've put together.
I noticed that you were keeping the parking structure. Is that parking structure going to remain for public, or is that going to be for the residential use only?
It will be for both. Who's ever using it now will continue to use it. The number is somewhere around 1,200 or 1,300 spaces. The beauty of it is that the first buildings that get built can be utilizing that structure for parking, because when you have to self-park a building, the costs are astronomical. It's $35,000 a space. So if we can kickstart the development with not having to construct those self-parking requirements, this is where this structure becomes extremely valuable without taking a single space away from existing users.
So will any of the other structures and the other phases have parking, or is that going to be basically the only parking?
No, that will, but you know, we're in Southern California. I mean, I'm from New York, and you know, people are not going to, you know, in the wintertime, they want everything right there when it's 15 degrees. But here, we're going to let the market dictate, you know, how many folks can use that. But yes, there will be additional parking structures required in the downtown, certainly in the mall property. But initially, when that mall is demolished, you have 40 acres of parking that can be used initially to kickstart the project. Then as the project moves forward and more developers believe that San Bernardino is the place to be, then that value add that's created, people can start to build self-parking into their buildings. So, great question. Bless you.
Okay, I had a question. I apologize. I didn't catch the housing units number. I don't want to mix it up with the construction jobs.
Yeah, well, just in the Carousel Mall, when we talk about construction jobs, we talk about those jobs in terms of construction job years. So when you see 27,000 construction job years, that means that over the life of the build-out, it would amount to something in the neighborhood of 2,000 jobs per year, a little bit more. With 12 years, that would be 24,000 construction job years. So, this is for the entire build-out. It's not only the residential units, it's for the build-out of the entire 4.25 million square feet. So basically, we're saying there will be a couple of thousand workers every year for the build-out period, totaling that 27,000 number. Now, does that mean it's going to get built in 12 years? The market will dictate that. But what will create that feeding frenzy is this as of right use. People love that. And, you know, we've demonstrated that elsewhere in cities of comparable size, that if you get your entitlements in place, they've got to be the right ones. We're not saying, you know, just come build anything you want, but you've got a team that knows what the right thing to do is. But when you create that certainty where someone comes in and in 3 or 4 months they can have a building permit rather than 3 years, this is incredible for the development community that says, how do I get in?
So is there a specific number for potential housing, or?
In the Carousel Mall, we're saying the maximum theoretical build-out, meaning that what PlaceWorks is studying from a, an impact standpoint, was 4,000 units. That's the maximum. So you study the maximum, because if the maximum doesn't get built, well, you know, it's because the market said, don't build it. But if you study less and then you have to come back for more, this is what you don't want to see happen. You want to think big and bold now. This is your downtown. Think big and bold.
Oh, and then for the video itself, I mean, Ernesto, I've had conversations with you about this being public. Is there plans for further video creation?
This is a work in progress.
Okay.
So this is by no means final. This, I would say in the last 3 or 4 weeks, this has gone through several iterations and will continue to go through them. But the beauty of it is that the tool that we're creating can change things on the fly. So when we want to see what those impacts are, and we want to see what those revenues are for the city, we're going to be able to do this on the fly. So if a building gets taller or shorter, or changes this or changes that, we're going to show the data, the analytics for that building to the city, to the planning firm, to see what the end result will be from a social, environmental, and economic point of view.
So this video will be available on Monday when the community is able to see it?
I mean, we'll present it to the city, and then, you know, the city would determine, you know, the actual timing for that. Oliver, I don't know. I mean, we've presented it already to the Planning Commission. When was it? About 6 weeks ago? So I believe the Planning Commission received it very well. It was not nearly at the completion point that this is today, and that's why 6 weeks from now this will be, you know, yesterday's news. But we did show it to the Planning Commission. We're showing it here. We have a meeting tomorrow we were invited to for the Inland Empire Chamber of Commerce that will be showing it. We think the time is now to spread the word and show. I mean, there's no hiding this. This is going to happen. And
so to answer your question, yes, it will be on the video on Monday.
Great. I couldn't do that. Well, but I couldn't do it even if I was the salesman.
So I'm no videographer, but there are some things that I felt like for public use, it is too long. It's 10 minutes long. Some of the wording needs to be in layman's terms.
Sure.
And then the beginning, don't get me wrong, the staff, I'm sure they did an amazing job, but it would shorten the video for the staff if they were provided at the end altogether an opportunity for spotlight.
That's a great comment, and I'm going to tell you what what the results of these comments have been. Started out at 19 minutes, went down to 17 minutes, went down to 14 minutes, went down to 12 minutes. It's now, you're right, 10 minutes. So I think we can probably get it down to 5 or 6 minutes. And if you think that's an appropriate time, that's what we'll do.
Well, I could watch it for an hour, but I appreciate the fact that you, in the concept, there's a variety of building heights. It's not just like rows and rows of, 20-story buildings.
Right.
But yeah, and so with a concept like that and a lot of the green space, and that is a big thing, the farm-to-table restaurants.
Yep.
There's a restaurant owner I'm really familiar with cities all over that have undergone redevelopment, and Oceanside is one. They're not changing the personality much of the downtown, but it used to be, no offense meant to the Marines because you're awesome, but they used to call it Marineland. And there's a gentleman down there that's shooting for a 5-star Michelin 5-star. And that's the concept, is that farm to table, the fresh fruits and vegetables in season. And there's a number of restaurants all over Southern California doing that. And that would just be delightful because as a rule, I don't eat out much because it's not appealing, but that's appealing.
It's rooftop.
Yeah,
it's
awesome.
Which is beautiful. You're not going to take an acre of land that you can build upon. Why do that? You do that out in, further in the suburbs. But in a city, you have these buildings that have not been built yet. So you can build in the factors of rooftop vegetation as opposed to a building that's built that you say, well, how do I get a rooftop now to work for this so that we don't have, my office on the top floor, looking up and seeing, the rain come through or, the squash leaking through the roof. But what we're saying here is this is the beauty of creating this from scratch and not just retrofitting it. You're building to this new norm.
Well, we definitely have the climate and the water in this particular area. And I've seen some spectacular rooftop gardens.
And these can be co-ops. These can be run by the community. And they can be community driven. We're talking about things that involve people in every step of the way.
Yeah, and that saves people not having to travel to get something like that because fresh produce, my gosh, we live in the perfect climate for it.
And the rule of thumb is, again, this is to create as much walkability as possible. We're not saying this is California, you're never going to be a driverless state, but the whole idea is drive down, get the driving, the vehicle miles traveled, get them down somehow. And the way to do that is not have somebody have to get into a car. So if you live, work, shop, learn, and play in a downtown, you're reducing that travel tremendously. And you're right by rail, you're right by bus. You've got all the ingredients here to really set the new example for California.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that because really that's how communities were built. In one respect, we're going back to what used to work.
Yes. You had the most robust rail system in the country. I'm from New York. We've got trains, we've got subways, we've got everything. You had the most robust rail system in the country. Back when, Ernie?
Before the 1950s.
Before the 50s. California had the #1 rail system. And then along came the highways. And, all we're saying is back to the future.
I just have one question. It's actually a design question. So, the way I look at the design, I know it's concept. It has a strong perimeter. But I'm trying to figure out what the tie is to the theater. I mean, I think the Frank Gehry project in downtown LA where he just built the new residential and it faces the Disney Concert Hall and sort of has a connection. I'm trying to figure out what the connection is between that, I guess, the first phase and the theater, or if there's actually a connection also to the county seat.
Gerhard? No, come up, Gerhard. We want the world to meet Gerhard here. This is some people never get the credit that they deserve, and Gerhard is one of those people that deserves a lot of credit.
Hello. Sorry for my accent. I heard myself and I was like, wow. So the connection to the theater, well, we have the garage there right now. This is a first iteration of this process. We are thinking actually of fronting the garage with perhaps some structures so that the theater doesn't look at the blank garage wall, but that there is something else that the theater has that it can look at. What form that will take is another story. We have looked at maybe partially taking down a piece of the garage, so we have room for a project there that would be much nicer than having a garage next to your most busy street, because that is the most popular street in the town. And that is the street that also takes you over in a continuation, to the county properties. So I think if that becomes sort of like an east-west cross street that is active, and then you have F Street as a north-south cross street that connects you to the transit station, I think you sort of have the core backbone of walkability in both directions. And I think that's, everything else will sort of like revolve around that. If you make those two streets lively, that's the core, right? And if anything else happens, then great. I mean, if you see what we're dreaming, of course, in our version, but one thing that you see in the design is that there is a lagoon, which sort of connects a new, perhaps, business downtown with the existing city hall in that area. If that happens, if we ever get busy enough to make that lively, and there's a marketplace there, there is maybe a farmer's market there at certain days, and other than that, it's just a plaza next to water where you can take maybe a gondola, and row around in the town, I think then you have one. I mean, if that happens, then we're off to the races. But you got to dream big. Because if you don't, it's not going to... I mean, we used to land, I'm not born here, but I'm a citizen now. We used to land on the moon. We could do things. We certainly can build a new downtown.
Oh,
I think that's a good way to end.
But again, another star of the project, Ernesto, please, just a few words, because we wouldn't be here today without these gentlemen.
No, thank you, Don. Yeah, no, and just to your question on the phasing, when we looked at the site and we said, where do we begin? One thing is to be next to the parking structure to reduce that cost and get things going immediately. But another thing would be to be on 2nd Street, close to the transit station. But as we thought it through, we thought of the theater and activating that corridor along 4th Street so that even as the rest of the project unfolds, you have at least 4th Street activated, and the California Theater is the gem of 4th Street. So there was some thought put into that. Thank you.
Any more questions? Well, thank you very much.
And thank you for the opportunity, and look forward to the next shorter presentation.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I don't need to show the last slide. I was just going to say we have our next DTAC meeting in April 27th, and so we'll be focusing on the development standards at that time. Okay.
All right, great. Are there any matters from the committee, members, staff? No, thank you. No, in that case, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.